Alright, welcome back to the next lesson on how to create a multiplayer Among Us game inside of Unity. For this lesson, I'll be showing you how to pick an imposter and synchronize that imposter across the network. Now before we begin, please make sure that you're subscribed to our channel and hit the notification bell so you can be up to date with all our latest videos. Now there's one thing that I'd like to change from our previous videos, and that has to do with our game controller script. Now if you remember from our last video, we added the game controller prefab to our waiting room scene because we wanted to be able to spawn players in the same way that we're spawning them into our game scene. But now we need to add code that deals with the general functionality of our game scene, and if we add this functionality to our game controller script, then that functionality will also be added to our waiting room scene. And so instead, I've taken my game controller script and I've renamed it to AU_spawn_points. And when you rename your C# script, you're also going to want to rename the class inside the script. And so I've renamed the class to AU_spawn_points, but then we also need to change the data type of our singleton, but doing this will cause an error within our myPhotonPlayer script. And this error will occur on this line where we are instantiating our player avatar. And that's because we need to change this data type as well. But once you've made these changes, we can save our script and go back to Unity, where I've created a new game controller script. Once you create this script, we'll open it up, and now within the script we can add the code that will only belong within our game scenes. And it's inside this script that we'll create the code for picking the imposter. Now the first thing that we need to do inside the script is add the usingPhoton.pun namespace, after which we can create two variables. The first is a photon view, which I've called myPV, and the second is an int that I've called whichPlayerIsImposter. Once we have these variables created, we need to initialize our photon view variable, and we'll do that within the start function. So I have myPV equals getComponent, and we're looking for a photon view, after which we'll create a function to hold all the code for picking the imposter. This function is a void function which I've called pickImposter, and inside this function the first thing that we want to do is randomly pick an integer value between 0 and the number of players within our room and save it into our whichPlayerIsImposter variable. So I have whichPlayerIsImposter equals random.range, passing in a 0 for the first parameter, and photonnetwork.currentroom.playerCount for the second. Now random.range will automatically subtract 1 from the top value, so we don't have to worry about an index out of range. Now the next thing that we want to do is create an RPC function so we can send this value to all the clients. And so I have the tag punRPC. This is then a void function which I've called RPC_syncImposter. This function then needs a parameter of type int called player number. Inside this function we first want to set our whichPlayerIsImposter variable equal to our parameter player number. We then want to create and call a function that belongs within our player controller script. And so I'm going to switch over to that script. Down at the bottom of the script I've created this new function which is a public void function called becomeImposter. This function requires a parameter of type int, which I've called imposter number. And inside this function, we first want to see if our local player is the same as the player in our player list at the imposter number. And so I have if photonnetwork.localPlayer equals photonnetwork.playerList, and we're looking for the player at the imposter number value. If this is true, then it means our local player has been picked to be the imposter. And so inside this if statement, we can set the isImposter variable equal to true. We can then make this variable an observable variable by adding it to our onPhotonSerializedView function. Inside the check for if stream.isWriting, we want to add stream.sendNext and pass in isImposter, and then in the else statement we want to add this.isImposter equals stream.receiveNext, and we want to cast it as a bool. This will make it so that the isImposter variable is synchronized across all clients for this avatar object. Once we've done this, we can save it and go back to our game controller script. Inside our RPC function, we can now call the becomeImposter function. And so I have AU_player_controller.localPlayer.becomeImposter, and I'm passing in our whichPlayerIsImposter variable. After this, we need to call our RPC function within the pickImposter function. And so I have myPV.RPC. I'm passing in the string name of our RPC function. For the second parameter, I'm passing in RPCTarget.all. And for the parameter, I'm passing in whichPlayerIsImposter. And once we create this function, we're going to call it within our start function. But we first need to check to see if we are the master client. So I have if photonnetwork.isMasterClient, and then I'm calling pickImposter. We can then save this script and we'll go back to Unity. Inside Unity, we want to load into our game scene. And here you can see on our game controller object, we've changed the old game controller script to the spawn point script. We can then drag on the new game controller script, and finally we need to attach a photon view to this object. And that should be everything that we need to do in order to pick an imposter for our game. And so I'm going to load into our quick start menu and I'll build my project. Alright, so I'm going to run a couple more instances of my build. I'll then click play in the editor and play in each standalone. Here you can see that I've loaded all 4 players into the waiting room scene, and so I'll click play on the master client. Then when the timer runs out, you can see that we've all loaded into the game scene. And now when I go to Unity and expand the hierarchy, I should be able to go through each AU player object and find only one imposter. And so the first one is not an imposter, the second one's not an imposter, third one's not an imposter, but the fourth one is. And now I should be able to go to the standalone that's controlling that player object. And when I press the space bar, you can see that it kills the players. Now that's everything that we're going to cover in this lesson on how to pick an imposter for your Among Us game. If you enjoyed this lesson, make sure that you give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And make sure that you're subscribed to our channel so you can be up to date with all our latest videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.